Hello, my name is Dejan Bojkov, Grandmaster from Bulgaria, and today we're going to speak about the good and the bad couples in chess. One of the most famous good couples in chess is a rook and a bishop versus a rook and a knight. The explanation for that is that, usually the bishop is the stronger piece of the knight, and in most of the cases, the endgames with the bishop versus a knight are favorable for those who have the bishop. And the other thing is that these pieces both are long-ranged and they can support each other. They can cooperate in a good way, and they can easily switch from one flank to another. Therefore, they are very effective. And the first sample that I would like to show you is a game between Frank Marshall playing his white against the world champion by that time, Emanuel Lasker. This is the position. They have just gone into an endgame. It is black to move. It's quite complicated endgame actually. Both of the parties have their weaknesses. White has a weakness on e4, and also his pieces are not very well developed. On the other side, we can immediately see that he has a very nice plan to place his king on d3 to attack the weak pawn on d4. Also black's pawns are not very good for the time being. And if he manages to achieve the setup king to d3 and then the knight via d to b3, attacking the pawn on d4 and probably the one on c5, he will have significant progress and probably he will be even better. So black needs to hurry to prevent this plan, and for him the essential thing now is to activate his pieces, his major forces, the rook that costs 5 pawns, we already know that, and the bishop. They have to be activated to the maximum. So the first move, rook b8, is perfectly understandable. The rook is taking the open file, attacking the pawn on b2. White has to lose some time. And then the second move, rook b5, is not that obvious, but it is perfectly sound. The rook is getting on the 5th rank, ready to attack many of the white pawns. The concrete threats are rook c5. Rook e5 can also be a threat. For example, in the line, let's say if white plays c3, rook e5 is already winning a pawn. Also, if white wants to develop the knight via a3, then rook e5 attacking the pawn is forcing rook e1, and then rook a5 is winning the pawn on a2. So already white has a difficult choice. In the game, he chose the move c4, preventing rook c5. Now, of course, black should not waste time. It's better to do everything with the tempo to develop the initiative. He played rook h5, attacking the pawn on h2, and using the fact that the move h4 is a mistake because of g5. And if he exchanges on g5, there will be the move rook h1 check, and then both the white pieces will be completely paralyzed. The knight and the rook will be completely out of the game, and he will be lost. So rook h5 is attacking the pawn on h2, and at the same time, practically this move is forcing white to move back his king, to make it inactive. After rook g1, black played c5. Everything is in accordance with the science. He has put all his pawns almost on the black squares, thus leaving free spaces for the bishop. And the bishop will be very active now. Also, he supported his pass pawn on d4, and now it became quite obvious that his position is much better. Here, finally, Marshall developed a piece, to which Lasker also developed his king. Rook f1 was played, king e7, and Marshall decided to show activity on the queen's flank. He opted for a3, hoping for b4, and then to include his knight into the game via b3. And before continuing his development, Lasker, who was a great player in the endgame, decided first to stop these ideas. He played rook h6. A very strong move with the idea, okay, this is prophylaxis. The idea is that after b4, he will play rook a6 and he will win the pawn on a3. Rook a1 is not possible because of c takes b4, and this exchange is obviously favorable for black. He will have now also an a pass pawn. Therefore, in the game, white did not play b4. He opted for passive defense. h4, rook a6, forcing the white rook into passivity with rook a1. Obviously, all the black pieces now are much superior than their counterparts. Bishop g4, finally the bishop went into the game, and you can see how immediately he switched to the other flank from c8 to g4, also pressing the knight, not letting him to go to an active position. And now the only thing that black has to do is further to activate the king via d6 to e5 or e6 to e5, and then everything will be ready for the final assault. This is what happened in the game. Bishop g4, king f2, king e6, white played a4. The point is that the rook endgame is hopeless because of the difference in the power of the rooks, and also because of the protected pass pawns. Sooner or later, white will go into a Zugzwang and he will lose the e4 pawn. Therefore, a4 was played, but it's already too late for white to save his game. King d4, and black won. King g2, rook f6, so the game. Rook e1, d3, rook f4, rook f1, king d4. The king is penetrating via e3 or c3, and the pass d pawn decides the game. The rest is not so important, but the thing that we needed to see was how easily the pieces switched from one flank to the other, created weaknesses in the opponent's camp, and finally this helped black to win the game. Here is a more recent sample. This is the game Morozevich as white playing against Gelfand from the Super Tournament in Bill in 2009. When there is imbalance in the position and it's not symmetrical, the bishop and the rook are extremely effective. And this is one case that I would like to show you. The current position, white is obviously better because the d5 pawn is very weak. At the moment he is already threatening to play bishop g5 to pin the knight, eventually to exchange it and to pick up that pawn. Also he can further strengthen the attack against it with rook b5 or rook d3. So in this position, after quite a long thought, Gelfand, who is a good positional player, played rook c8. Probably not the best move though. I guess that his best chance was to sacrifice this pawn. Something like a6 would have been more appropriate. Bishop g5, rook c8, let's say c3, forcing c3. At some moment the pawn on d5 will go down, but the point is that then there will be a rook endgame that is famous for its drawing tendencies, and this was black's best chance. But in the game he decided not to give anything. He played rook c8, and Morozevich used the chance to disbalance the position a bit further. So he grabbed the a7 pawn, and now he has a pawn majority on the queen's flank. After rook takes c2, he went back with the bishop on e3. Much better than d4 for many reasons. First of all, the bishop from e3 is protecting the important f4 square. Eventually a knight can go there, so this is a good thing to protect that square. Secondly, it is shutting the way from the rook from e7 to go to e2 and to double the rooks on the second rank. Third, it is also protecting the c1 square, thus letting the rook to become active via d4 and then b4. It's giving more freedom. So that bishop on e3 has so many functions, and if we compare it to the knight on f6, we will clearly see the difference. Black played rook d7 to protect the pawn on d5, rook b5, strengthening further the position, and at the same time white is preparing the advance of the pawns on the queen's flank. His plan is very easy, very neat. a4, b4, a5, then rook b6, b5, a6, and he will create a very strong pass pawn on the queen's flank. At the same time, black needs to wait patiently and to see what will happen. h6, a4, rook c4. Of course, it's impossible for a human being to wait like that to be slaughtered, so he decided to activate the rook a bit, but this only helped white to collect the point faster, as now when the rook is on h4, white excluded it from the game with the move f4. The rook is out of the contest. Now the idea is that in case of rook g4, white can also use his king. Rook g4 and now king h3. There is already a direct threat that white takes on d5 two times, and the rook on g4 will be hanging in the end. And in case of rook e7, he takes on d5 anyway, rook g1, rook d8 check, king h7, bishop d4. There are no mating threats against the white king, and he won a pawn. He has winning position already. So this is not decision for black's problems. This is not the solution for his problems. And he played rook h5, somehow trying to attack the pawn on f4. Rook f5 and knight h5 might be an idea somewhere in the future, but this is not really a threat. King g2, white is further improving his pieces. He doesn't need to hurry, and there are any tricks. His plan is going to be as we know it: a5, b4, rook b6, b5 and a6. It will be even more effective now with the rook shot on the king's flank on h5, and as you can see, the bishop is helping in that plan. It will be protecting the a7 square for the pass pawn, and at the same time it is protecting the pawn on f4, stopping the pawn on d4, which we cannot say for the black pieces, especially for the knight, that it has so many functions. It's impossible for the knight to play on the both flanks. Knight e4, here black blundered with that move, but anyway I believe that his position was already lost. And after rook d4, it was a threat that black missed. He played rook d6 and he resigned after rook takes e4, but anyway his position was already lost as rook b4 was coming and white was collecting the important pawn on b7, and with two passers he was winning easily. The bishop and the rook couple can be very good also in the middle game, especially if there is disbalance in the position, like it is in that case. This is the game Gligoric against Portish that was played in Zagreb 1965, and if the pieces are very well centralized like it is now, obviously white is much superior at the moment. He is holding the open file. The bishop on e6 is played perfectly. He further strengthens the position with rook e5, queen f6, queen e3, intending to advance the pawn, the f pawn to f4 and to f5. Now probably the best chance for black would have been to play rook e8, with the idea after f4 to jump knight f7 and to exchange the knight for the bishop. In that case, white would still be better, for this endgame is quite dangerous for black because of the passed pawn on e6, very strong passed pawn, but at least black would have had some chances. In the game, he allowed further activity of the white pieces. Instead of rook e8, he played rook f8, bishop b3, and now white is already creating some really dangerous threats. The first of them is rook e6, and this is a deadly threat. For example, if now black plays some indifferent move, like a6, there is rook e6 coming, attacking the knight and the queen. Queen d8 is only move, and now it is mate after rook takes h6 and queen takes h6. The bishop is too active on b3. Therefore, black should probably have kept his knight nearer his king. Knight f5 was the best move. Although after queen f4, white is obviously better, but there is still a lot of fight until he loses the game. However, in the game he played knight b5. Note that this knight did not really have strongholds, and this was one of the problems for black. If the knight does not have good squares to occupy, it's very hard for it to fight against the bishop. After knight b5, rook e6 was played. Again, grabbing the pawn is losing on the spot because of the same mating idea. So black cannot take the pawn on b2. If queen g5, this is something that white would like to do. He would like to exchange the queens and to go into a favorable endgame with a rook and a bishop against a rook and a knight. This is a method that white is always trying for. We know already that the knight is much less active than the bishop in this kind of endgames. Finally, what was played in the game was the move queen h4. But now after g3, the queen has too many things, too many objects to protect. If queen h5 now, bishop c2 is coming, followed by queen e4 or queen d3. There will be a strong battery, and mate on h7 is coming. And after queen takes h3, that was played into the game, black played queen e5, perfectly centralizing all his pieces, with the simple threat a4 to trap the knight on b5. And also there is the threat rook e7 at some moments, rook h6 at some moments if the queen is far away from h3. And here he easily won. a5 was played, and the last threat that I did not mention, rook e8, and black resigned because of the line rook e8, queen e8, king h7, and mate the way that you like it. This is the game Botvinnik against Chehover that was played in 1938 at the Championship of USSR. We have mentioned this already. The knight needs strongholds if he wants to fight against the bishop. And here he doesn't have the strongholds. The pawns in the center are in white's favor, even though they're doubled. Those on c4 and c3, they're taking away the squares for the knight, especially the strong d4 square. So in this position, white is clearly better thanks to this, and also thanks to the fact that he has in his disposal the strong d5 square, from where he can use it for the rooks, and he can also use it for the bishop. If he places his bishop on d5, it will be attacking both the flanks, the f7 and the b7 square. And this is how Botvinnik treats the position. He takes on c5, rook d1. Black needs to fight for the open file. He played rook d8, but now rook d5. The importance of the c4 pawn. White is fighting for the open file, and he has very good support. Black played b6, clearing the diagonal. Rook d1, knight a5. So already white has strengthened his position. He is strengthening the position a bit further with the move h3, opening a hollow for his king. This will be always useful. Now he would like in some moments to play rook d7 already to attack on the 7th rank with his pieces. So black opted for rook takes d5. He was hoping that white will take with the pawn, thus making his pawns look a bit better. But this will be a positional mistake, as now black plays not knight b7, which will be generally a good idea because of the move knight d6 and then to block the position. But here there is the double attack queen a4 that will pick up a pawn for white. Black will play queen d6, and this is sufficient for equality already, as the bishop is inactive. It is not attacking anything. So the good move was played by Botvinnik. He took on d5 with his rook, again threatening to attack on the 7th rank. Queen e7, and now further improvement of the position, the bishop is going to g4. Again, the threat is rook d7. Queen b7, using the pin to stop white's intentions, but now bishop f5, very strong move, not only protecting the queen on e4 and creating threats like rook d8, but also white is creating a threat of yes, rook d8 is the threat. Also rook takes e5 is a threat. Sorry, rook d8 is not a threat. This is nonsense. Then the queen is protected from the knight. My apologies. But white is using the fact that g6 is not working for black because of bishop takes g6, g takes, f takes g6, queen g6, king f8, rook d6, and with rook f6 coming, white is winning the queen for the rook. So rook takes e5 is the threat, and black played queen b8, protecting the pawn on e5, rook d7, strengthening further the position. In such situations, we already said it, white would like to exchange the queens and to go into a favorable endgame. Rook d7 is creating a concrete threat, bishop h7 check, and after king f8, queen d5, threatening the pawn on f7, and in case of rook e7 there will be rook d8, picking up the queen. So black has to play rook d8. Now a small tactical trick. Queen takes pawn on e5. This is not really winning the pawn, as black can take back the pawn on c4. Of course, this is mate on the back rank. But black can take the pawn on c4, and this is something that white dreamed of. They went into an endgame with a favorable couple, a rook and a bishop, and disbalance in the position. Now again, very instructive moment in the game. Botvinnik did not go for the material, he didn't take the pawn, but he preferred to improve the position of his pieces. Rook takes a7 here is not ideal because of knight d6, bishop d3, c4, bishop f1. You see now the bishop is very passive. Knight b5, the rook has to retreat, let's say to a6. Rook c8, protecting the pawn, and this pawn will be very dangerous after black takes on c3. Therefore, white treated the position in a better way. He played bishop e4, keeping the rook on the open file, the only open file, and intending to put the bishop on d5 for the attack of the f7 pawn, and after that to advance the pawns with e4, f4, e5, f5, etc., and to create a pass pawn. Knight a3 was played, bishop d5, rook f8. Now we can see how considerable the advantage of the white pieces are. e4, a5, There were other options, but they are also losing. For example, c4 is losing because of rook takes a7, and on knight b5 there is rook b7. White is picking a pawn at the end on the queen's flank. c4, and white converted his advantage after the following moves: knight takes b5, e5. We already mentioned that plan. Botvinnik is simply following the plan that he had in mind. He improved the king a bit, king f2. After g5, okay, it's a moment black is lacking moves. Knight e6, king e3. All the pieces are already into the game. And finally, f5 is played. A pass pawn is created. And black is going to resign in a couple of moves. Actually, he did it here because the e pawn is unstoppable. If rook e8, there is e7 check, king somewhere, bishop c6, and white is winning the rook. And finally, the knowledge that we have about the chess couples will help us also in some openings. Some lines are designed in achieving such a good couple, and there is one sample like that. This is the Sveshnikov Sicilian. After the normal moves, we achieve the main line: e5, knight b5, d6, bishop g5. Everything is theory. And now there are two moves, of course. White can play knight d5 immediately, or take on f6. We're going to have a look at that one. Bishop takes f6, g takes f6, knight d5, bishop g7, and now white just makes the natural moves. He plays bishop d3, he develops his pieces. Knight e7, black is fighting for the center. Knight takes e7, queen takes c7, and of course the main priority for white in this position would be to bring back the knight from a3 into the game and to occupy with that knight the important d5 or the important f5 square. So c3 is the most natural move, and black has to hurry in order not to get worse. He plays f5, knight c2. There is a nice choice for the knight, either e3 or b4 square. Black does not really care about that one. He plays bishop b7, knight e3. He's sacrificing a pawn for the time being, but he's counting on this tactical resource: knight f5, queen f6, bishop takes e4, and this seems to be very scary for black. Now, if black takes on e4, there will be the simple knight takes d6 followed by knight takes e4, and white will be an extra pawn, and black's king will be in the center. However, black is not worried that line because of the move d5. He's going to sacrifice a pawn, but in order to exchange the queens. Bishop takes d5, only move if he wants to fight for an advantage. Rook d8, pinning the bishop. Now the only move to save it is queen g4, rook takes d5, and now after the exchange of the queens we achieve this position. Okay, knight f5 is the obvious move that white has to play, and this is famous tabia that was popular in the 1990s, but then disappeared completely from the openings. Why? Well, obviously white is a pawn up, and also he has very, very good pawns. The pawn structure that he has is excellent. All his pawns are compact. On the other hand, black has 3 pawn islands. But the trumps that black has, these are the strong bishop on b7, the open file for the rooks, active rooks, and also active king, and also the possibility to advance the pawns with f5, e4, f4, etc. So black is doing really fine here. And from the 8 games that were played, white had the percentage of only 38%. So he lost 2 games and he made all the rest of them draws. For example, here is one sample. King e6, knight e3, rook d7, and Anand against Kramnik opted here for king e2, f5, already threatening f4 to take back the pawn, f3, f4, kicking away the knight, knight c2, rook g8. Black's counterplay is becoming quite obvious. Attacking on g2, the rook from d7 is ready to jump on d2 in case of a need. And here Anand played rook g1, bishop d5, and decided to give back the pawn with king f2. After bishop takes a2, knight d4, he takes d4, he took back on a2. He was still a bit worse, but somehow he managed to make the draw. Thank you all, and I hope that I was helpful.